Live NFL trivia every Tuesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge and have a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. Picture this. You're a defensive end and you get to the quarterback late. Because of this, the referee throws the flag and calls you for roughing the passer. It's 15 yards and an automatic first down. Except on top of that, you go to the penalty box. You have to sit out for a certain number of plays and watch from the sideline because of your actions. Can you imagine the NFL having a penalty box, just like they do in hockey and rugby? Well, as crazy and far out there as that idea sounds, in 1994, the NFL was actually considering implementing a penalty box. This is the story behind why the proposal was made, how it would have worked, and why we don't see that system in place today. To understand how we got to this point, I should note that this was not the first time that a penalty box was being considered. As far back as the 1950s, there were discussions floated around, though it wasn't quite the same thing. In 1953, the NFL proposed adding a penalty box, though not for the same reasons that happened in 1994. The penalty box system in 1953 would have replaced ejections. Instead of a player getting ejected, they would have sat out for a certain period of time. Obviously, this did not go anywhere. But 3 years later in 1956, a different penalty box system was proposed by a player. Gordy Soltau, who played 9 years in the NFL with the San Francisco 49ers and made it to 3 Pro Bowls, said that a penalty box system should be implemented. He felt that the 15-yard penalty for unnecessary roughness was not harsh enough. However, the proposal he had in mind would have been absolutely insane and chaotic. Under this one, a player would be suspended for an entire quarter, and while that player was suspended, the team would have to play down a man. This could lead to scenarios where a team is playing 10 on 10, 11 on 9, or any other variant along those lines. If this proposal went into place, then a roughing the passer penalty would have been a death sentence for teams. Fortunately, this proposal never went anywhere, and it was just proposed by a player. But after the idea of a penalty box sat on the back burner for a bit, roughly 4 decades later, everything changed. In 1994, the league had a problem on their hands. Scoring was down. The game was getting boring in the eyes of a lot of people. During the mid-90s, the NFL was thinking of implementing some brand new rules to improve offensive play. This was when the 2-point conversion was added. This was when the kickoff was moved back to the 30-yard line to increase starting field position. This was when a proposal was in place where a field goal would be worth anywhere from 1 to 3 points, depending on how far back it was kicked. If you want to learn more about that weird proposal, then click the video in the upper right corner. And one of the other ways that offensive production would be increased was if the quarterback stayed healthy. At the end of the day, this is a quarterback-driven sport, and the best way to promote the game is to have strong quarterback play. And as things stood, there was no real punishment for knocking a quarterback out of the game with any legal hit. Through 3 months in 1994, only one player was fined for a hit on the quarterback. That came on this hit right here made by James Francis against Troy Aikman. With the exception of that play, you could hit the quarterback high and late and hope to knock him out of the game. And the absolute worst that would happen would be a 15-yard penalty. No ejection, no fine, no suspension, no nothing. Aikman left the game against the Cardinals 2 weeks earlier for this hit by Wilbur Marshall. Nothing happened. Raiders quarterback Jeff Hostetler, who made the Pro Bowl that season, left the game against the Steelers with a concussion. Nothing happened. Steve Young took so many hits in a game against the Eagles that head coach George Seifert pulled him from the game to avoid injury. Nothing happened. Quarterbacks were taking a beating, and nothing was happening. And because of this, the penalty box system was proposed. Greg Aiello, the director of communication for the NFL, said that the proposal would be for flagrant hits on the quarterback. John McVay, the vice president for football administration for the San Francisco 49ers, was the one who made the proposal, and went pretty in depth on how such a system would work. As McVay said, these same defensive players who avoid punters, holders, and kickers are good enough athletes to avoid hitting the quarterback after he's released the ball. So many people are putting hits on the quarterback this year that someone needs to come up with something innovative to try and stop it. Would this penalty box be as drastic as the one that Soltau proposed in 1956? Not even close. In fact, this idea of a penalty box doesn't seem too far out there. If a player gets called for a late hit, that player would have to sit out for 15 plays, but that team wouldn't have to play a man down. You're still playing 11 on 11, but you're without that player for a select number of plays. McVay said that while referees currently have the power to eject players for late hits, you never see it, since refs are hesitant to do that, and since that would be a bit harsh. This system would punish late hits and protect quarterbacks, while at the same time not being too excessive. However, this obviously never came to fruition. There are a few problems with this system that should be apparent right off the bat. Number 1, not all roughing the passer penalties are created equally. Obviously, you have plays like this, where the late hit is blatant and to the point where it might be assault. But then you have plays like this, where I genuinely don't know how roughing the passer was even called here. Telling a player that they have to sit out for 15 plays for this is awfully harsh. And then if you say that only some roughing the passer penalties are eligible for the penalty box, then it's way too judgmental and arbitrary, and nobody knows where the line is. It's the same reason why the 5-yard and 15-yard face mask penalty difference was abolished. The moment you start having to judge intent in real time, it gets way too complicated. Number 2, what counts as a play? Is it total plays? Is it plays on that side of the ball? If it's total plays, then the punishment might not be harsh enough. Because if you're a defender who sits out, your team gets a turnover on the next play, and then they go on a 14-play drive, you serve no punishment whatsoever, you just took one play off. Conversely, if it's plays on that side of the ball, then the punishment might be too harsh, because if you force a bunch of turnovers and 3 and outs while your offense goes on long sustained drives, you could be out for an entire half, and maybe an hour of real time. Number 3, how are referees going to keep track of plays, especially if 2 players have roughing the passer penalties? With hockey and rugby, it's easy. Someone goes into the penalty box, and they sit there for 2 minutes. Easy to keep track of. With a play count, especially one that's 15 plays long, you have plays that don't count. And depending on how it's implemented, as I said earlier, it could last for an hour of real time. Not an easy thing to keep track of. There are quite a few things with this system that would have needed to be worked out, because as it was proposed by McVay, it was always going to be a bit problematic. In the end, the penalty box never happened. It's been over 25 years since. I'm not sure that the proposal is ever going to come back or come to fruition. Still, it is an interesting concept to think about. The game has evolved in many ways over the past 100 years, and for a brief moment in time, it was looking like one of those evolutions was going to be the creation of the sin bin. Be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JarroGator9 and subscribe to 60-second NFL history on YouTube. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping with the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.